This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Cohesity and Carasoft. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, the case against rip and replace at the Department of Veterans Affairs, building resilience into your agency's data and cyber efforts, and a top job at the Pentagon could boomerang back into existence. Welcome to FedGov Today with Francis Rose. The leader of the IT operation at the Department of Veterans Affairs is encouraging his team to, quote, embrace the red. He's writing about the vision and implementation for that operation in a series of blog posts about digital transformation. Kurt DelBene is Assistant Secretary for Information and Technology and Chief Information Officer at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Kurt, welcome. It's great to see you. I quote, "This means," you write, "that rather than hide issues from the rest of the team, we encourage people to bring them forward so we can solve them together." Why is that important, in your view, for the vision you're trying to deploy at VA?
Well, I think one thing, we live in a world of incredible complexity. And it's natural when there's a problem in the system to say, well, it was the system's fault, it was another team's fault. And if we're ever going to get great about incrementally getting better in our technical prowess, our technical oversight, it requires people to say, hey, in this case, actually, the problem was with me, or was with our systems. Here's how we need to get better at it. And we also have to actually unleash the problem-solving capabilities of the whole team. So if people kind of try to get through the after-action report without really kind of digging in, then the problems don't get solved and we don't get better. So we're after kind of continuously getting better and better in our operational rigor. And a key part of that is owning the problem, bringing it forward to the group so we can solve it together.
You use the word incremental, and that's a theme that runs throughout all 10 of these posts that you've put up so far. Yet, a lot of the issues that VA is up against from a technology perspective are fairly urgent. How do you balance trying to get a lot done in a short period of time, especially as a political appointee, with the idea that the incremental approach has proven to be successful for VA and for other agencies?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I've been focusing on how we as a team get better in the work that we do. So as you say, you know, as a political appointee, I only have so much time here. It's about us just improving our ability to define visions for where we want to go, have a connected roadmap for how we get there, have real critical measures of our progress, and then really drive increased operational rigor in every single day. You know, 8 a.m. every morning, I'm with the team. We're diagnosing every single issue that happened in the past 24 hours, figuring out what we're going to do about it, how we're going to get better as a team. And that's where incrementalism really comes in. Mm-hmm. You know, we ask ourselves a lot, did we get a month better every month? Did we incrementally get towards that goal? But as you say, it's also a balance. There's big things that we're doing in the VA, and we got to push those forward. But we also got to figure out, how do we make our systems, how do we make our processes better every day? Yeah,
I was struck by that balance that you're trying to reach there. Part 4 of your series, connect the vision to a 2 or 3 year roadmap, but embrace agile development. So you kind of have a foot in both camps, it sounds like.
It is. So you got to know where you're going. And in a lot of cases, you know, you go to your stakeholders. A lot of times I think our industry says, well, go to stakeholders and understand what their vision is. And I've told the team, you know, sometimes they don't have a clearly articulated vision, particularly relative to their IT investments they need. So let's go to them with a straw man and actually say, this is what we think you're looking to do. Here's how we think we could deliver that, and then engage with them in the conversation. But the other thing we do is we are very strict now about our prioritization of the work we have to do every day. And so we do a one-to-end list that says, if we find we have extra dollars because we were cheaper here than we thought we'd be, what's the next thing we would fund in each and every one of the programs? And that has to be in a stacked priority list. Absolute. The first thing we do this, then this, then this. And so that's that balancing act between the long-term vision and the roadmap and what we're doing every day.
How different is that roadmap and the culture that it sounds like you're trying to build to what you found when you first got to VA, Kurt?
Well, I think they've done things like embrace agile development, and that's a big part of it. Instead of going what in the industry has been called waterfall, of have the big, long goal and then figure out what are the big milestones you're going to deliver against, the team had already gone to this notion of agile development and Scrum teams. Mm-hmm. But I think what needed to be done is embrace that in a broader kind of initiative. Again, as I say, what's our vision, what's our roadmap, what's our one-to-end list, how do we do our improve operational rigor over time? And then the other thing, 2 things we haven't talked about, is how do you create a delightful end user experience for your end users? You know, we have veterans, millions of veterans, and their experience with the VA increasingly is going to be that digital front door. and they have expectations of what that experience looks like that is defined by their consumer experience. So how do we create an experience that's just as good? And then the final thing is investing in your people. How do you make it, what's the deal for somebody to come to the VA? How do you make that deal as good as the deal as they get with industry, as well as adding on this ability to serve veterans, which is that sacred, trust and that commitment that we all have.
Something that you talked about there is something that folks have been talking about in this space for the entire 17 years that I've been here, which is we want to make the digital experience for a citizen the same as that person experiences when they deal with a private sector company.
Absolutely.
How close do you think you're getting to reaching that point so you can say, well, we're kind of finally now on the same level?
I think we're making good strides. VA.gov gets something like 19 million people visited every year. We have gotten a lot of transactions to actually occur, people submitting benefits, submitting the application process for getting health care, for getting memorial benefits as well. So we get a lot of that digital transactioning happening. The other thing we're doing is we built a mobile experience, a mobile app, and that is, the ratings that we're getting for that are incredible. And the millions of veterans that are using, you pull out your phone and that's how you want to interact with VA and actually connecting to those critical services. At the same time, we've got a lot of those applications that can't yet go through those digital front doors. But we've got that prioritization. The next thing we want to add to the website's this, followed by this, followed by this. And we've got great UI designers, we've got great back-end designers, and we're just rolling it out piece by piece by piece.
These posts lay out a pretty clear strategic vision. How do you convert that to tactical successes using what you called critical measures of progress to get the end result, which is better services for vets?
Well, I think the first thing is actually to have those visions in place. This is an incredibly broad place. It's probably the largest IT shop, certainly in the public sector. I mean, if you think of DoD is larger, but it is in the different armed services kind of sub-segmented. We're all one big happy family, so to speak. So it's about having clarity of roadmaps and then incrementally delivering over and over again. And then the other thing we've really focused on is what we call KPI, or key performance metrics, that we measure we split the year in two. And we do an iterative cycle every semester that says, as an organization, these are the things we're going to measure and hold ourselves accountable for. And we do that within the organization overall, and then we bring it down to the portfolio level. And so we are unified as a team towards where we're trying to get to as a result of that.
What are some of the big rocks that you're trying to move specifically at the program level right now?
Well, we have some very large programs we're working on. Electronic health records transformation, as you and I talked about ahead of time, and transforming our financial management system, with the result of the PACT Act really kind of automating our digital end-to-end in terms of benefits application. Take the entire place. We have a major transformation going on in every piece of the organization. But then I'm really passionate about how good are we in our operational rigor. So we measure things like the uptime of all of our systems. How do we get to great resiliency in those systems? So even if there is a failure, and there's gonna be, it kicks over into the backup system automatically without intervention. We also measure things like the percentage of incidents caused by change. It's a natural thing in our industry where you change a system and you disrupt that system. If you're not super careful about how you introduce that change, you're going to get an error. And so you get better by measuring how often we mess up something like that. So again, marrying that vision with the execution, with the operational rigor, I think is really the key.
If this were the 1950s, the magic word would have been EHR, and something would have dropped down on the set. What's your relationship with the EHR office? Because it's a little different than I think most program offices across the federal government are used to.
It is. It's one of the few systems that has been pulled out into its own organization, led by Neil Evans, that reports directly to the Deputy Secretary. We are a key part of that in OIT, our Office of Information and Technology, in that all the scaffolding that goes into supporting the new EHR, the Oracle Cerner EHR, is within our team. We work very collaboratively with them. I am very engaged with that team on a technical basis of understanding where are the risks, Are we ready? As you know, we're in a pause right now. What are our criteria to restart? How do we feel like we're doing against those? So it's a very deep engagement with that team at the leadership level, and then it's a supporting effort across our entire team.
Dr. Evans will be on the program in the next couple of weeks to talk about the EHR program. What's your sense of where not just the EHR program, but some of those other big ones that you talked about stand right now and where they're going?
I think they're all on progress, improving every day. If you look at EHR, as I said, we took a pause. We are getting closer to where we think we need to be able to do that restart. We have a shared deployment called FHCC, or North Chicago implementation, where it's a joint site. Both DoD is there along with VA. And that's really going to be a great test where, how do these two organizations merge into a consistent set of processes, all supported by a single implementation, because the HR is a shared implementation across those two big customers. And so that's what we're really focused on now, is making sure that that goes well, but then also constantly reevaluating, making sure the criteria from our stakeholders' perspective is met to be able to do a restart. We're also doing a financial management transformation. That's actually going quite well. I feel really good about the modernization plan for our core systems in the benefit space as well. Another thing we haven't talked much about is on the desktop. We have almost 700,000 desktops that we support, and that can even be a digital experience as well. So imagine being able to detect whether a particular desktop is having trouble and that person's login time is too long, or the battery isn't working well. Well, we've deployed digital agents so that we can actually figure that ahead of time. Because imagine the delight if you go to an end user and we said, we notice your login time is too long. We're actually going to give you a new PC to solve that problem for you. Or how about if we fix that problem before you even notice it as well? So across the estate, we're figuring out how to modernize the entire experience for the benefit of our end users and for veterans.
Kurt DelBene, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
You can find a link to the blog series Kurt DelBene wrote and more about the IT office at VA on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, building resilience into your agency's data and cyber efforts. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
Don't miss the 7th Annual Appian Government Conference on November 29th in Tysons, Virginia, to learn how you can use low-code and AI process automation to empower your workforce, enhance citizen engagement, and reimagine service delivery. Register now at appiangovernment.com.
Welcome back. The word resilience doesn't appear in either the federal zero trust strategy or the federal data strategy, but federal leaders say the concepts in both of those documents will lead to more resilient data and cyber postures for the federal government. Sanjay Poonen is CEO of Cohesity. Sanjay, welcome. It's great to see you. What does data and cyber resilience look like for a federal agency?
First off, Francis, thank you for having me on the show. Resilience is being able to respond to some kind of incident. In the past, it may have been just a disaster that happens, flood, earthquake. But right now, a biggest part of the incidents that people are worried about are cyber incidents, that the bad guys are trying to corrupt data. This has wreaked havoc in state, local, and commercial, and they're looking for any agency. We have 400 agencies in our customer base. We're looking to ways by which they can both protect their data, traditionally what may have been known as back it up, but then also recover it. And I think the best way in which we help our customers respond to that is being able to design this just the way you recover from a cold. If someone told you were never going to have a cold, you'd be like, well, I want some of that DNA. But what you want to do is be able to recover really quickly from a cold. And the speed of cyber recovery is what we encourage federal agencies to focus on.
That's part of the cultural change that I think has happened in the federal government over the past maybe decade or so, when people were still building moats around their organizations and the goal was to never get breached. That's out the window. Agencies seem to finally have realized that. Is that a fair read on my part?
I think that's a fair read. I think when you have those layers of defense, the moat picture is absolutely the right one. You could have your best defenses around your network, like a Palo Alto, an endpoint like a CrowdStrike, but your crown jewels are your data. Data is the new oil. And everyone knew, just like those crown jewels of the king and the queen's crowns or whatever their top assets were, if you got to that data. So protecting the data now is the most important aspect, because it's not just being able to lifeblood your organization, it's how you make decisions.
Mm-hmm. How do you encourage people to resist that temptation to continue just the moat building around those crown jewels? Because it strikes me that would be an easy trap to fall back into.
I don't think, Francis, the perspective is to stop having those moats. Mm-hmm. You do need layers of defense. What you need to be able to build into that is not just those defense layers and detection mechanisms. You need to build recovery. In other words, we actually advise many of our agencies, customers, assume you get breached, mm-hmm. okay? If you get breached, maybe it's not a matter of if, but when. How quickly can you recover? And the recovery aspects of it now have to be tested. So we encourage our customers to design a black swan simulation event. Okay, and if you ask yourself, if you were to get hit, not by a plane hitting the buildings in 9/11 style, but by all of your systems going down, how quickly can you reboot the agency, so mm-hmm. to speak? And simulating that and deciding, okay, these 100 apps need to come up quickly, maybe in an hour. These next 500 apps maybe in a day. And these other apps, I don't care if it comes back in a week.
What are the most successful elements of a quick recovery like that in a case where there's stuff that has to be back online as quickly as possible?
First off, you want to have detection that allows you to understand there's possible sleeper cell malware existing. Those are first signs to detecting it. This is the sign of saying, hey, do I have a cold, the detection of it. I think the speed of recovery and ways by which you can simulate in a clean room where the data that's coming out of those vaults or those archives are clean. So we design for our customers an aspect of a clean room where the data then they can recover from that, and the speed of being able to design a network and a storage infrastructure, a security infrastructure. These are the things we work closely, not just with the agencies, but also our system integrator friends in the federal government to ensure that we design those policies well for the government.
When you've gone into work with clients in the federal government, what are the mistakes that you've seen that maybe are avoidable mistakes for people who may not be as far down this path as others?
I think traditionally people feel like traditional backup tools could do this, and many of them were built 30, 40 years ago and haven't updated their architectures to be fast, because the volume data is now so much bigger. That's number one. Number two, they think of this as a storage topic as opposed to a security topic, and there's so much immense amount of research now. And then three, I think they basically are confused as to how artificial intelligence is going to change the landscape. So we're doing some groundbreaking work in AI where actually you can use this as a way in which you get an offensive view of things as opposed to worrying that AI is actually going to affect the way in which you build protection of data.
Sanjay Poonen, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Francis.
You can read more about data resilience at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, a top job at the Pentagon could boomerang back into existence. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. Here's Dominic Del Molino, Vice President for Worldwide Public Sector Technology and Innovation at AWS, from AI in Depth.
I think a lot of people think there's this one AI, but what we're really seeing are you can use AI that's tuned for purpose. It's good at understanding language. It's good at understanding sound. It's good at understanding pictures. It's good at understanding context or data that's specific to the mission. You want an AI that's tuned for that because it'll be much more efficient and it'll be much more able to give the good answers that you need for that specific mission purpose. So we see this collection of AI starting to really blossom.
To watch the whole program, go to fedgovtoday.com/AI. Welcome back. The Senate's version of the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act would restore the office of the Chief Management Officer at the Department of Defense. That office went away just in 2021 after about a 13-year run. Elizabeth Field is Director of Defense Capabilities and Management at the Government Accountability Office. Elizabeth, welcome. You're writing about the CMO office. What's the history? How did we get where we are, where it doesn't exist anymore, but it might exist again? And how did we get here?
Yeah, it's a little hard to follow, but basically a number of years ago in FY18, Congress created the Chief Management Officer position, which is something that GAO had been calling for a long time to really try to break through the logjam of trying to transform DoD's business operations. A couple years later, Congress disestablished the position, I think out of a concern that it had not yet been successful. However, I would note that a lot of people who looked at this issue found that the Chief Management Officer had not been set up up for success, and that might be part of why it was not fully successful. So over the past couple of years, DoD has been working to go through the motions of disestablishing the office and creating new governance structures and entities. But as you point out, now there's another possibility that the CMO will come back.
Who owns all the functions that the CMO held? Last CMO was Lisa Hirschman.
That's right.
Who owns those responsibilities now? Where does that portfolio live?
So they've been divvied up among a few different offices. The Chief Information Officer, the CIO, has some of the responsibilities, Comptroller, CAPE, Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation, but they also reinvigorated the Director of Administration and Management, who was dual-hatted as the Performance Improvement Officer, to take a lot of the CMO responsibilities.
All right, one of your key takeaways from the work you've most recently done is this: DoD uses a centralized data analytics platform called Advana to link various DoD data sources. What is Advana and what's in there?
Well, Advana is a system which some people refer to as a data lake or a suite of dashboards and applications used throughout DoD for a host of different reasons, some of which are classified, some unclassified. It is an attempt to try to have sort of one authoritative source of data for the department and to try to make the department more of a data-driven organization. Within Advana, there are certain applications called Pulse and Business Health Metrics that are specifically designed to help DoD officials track reform efforts.
What's the data that's coming into those systems, and where's that all coming from, Elizabeth?
Well, it depends on the application, but certainly a lot of it is coming from the services and the various components within the Office of the Secretary of Defense. For example, they might use it to track budget execution.
What exactly do you see when you look at either bringing back the office, what the DoD should be doing now as far as managing all of this, all of that?
Well, I think department officials have made a number of strides in the past few years, and what they have tried to do, which I think is admirable, is to sort of weave an approach to business reform and hopefully transformation into the fabric of the department in such a way that whether offices and positions change, an emphasis and an understanding of the importance of reform will be sustained over the long term. For example, incorporating an approach to reform through the PPVE process, which I know you're well familiar with.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, there's been a task force that is looking at how to change that and so on. What's the ability for using this kind of data for anyone who's trying to do any kind of reform effort like that across the department?
Well, I think regardless of how the PPVE process changes, the department will be able to sort of bring this new emphasis on reform and data-driven reform along with those changes. So I think that's all positive.
There's a section in your work that is rhetorically titled, "Is the department's approach to reform working?" Maybe you can and maybe you can't directly answer that question, but what did you find as you examined potentially that rhetorical question at least?
Well, it's too soon to tell is the answer. And the reason is, there are a couple of reasons. One, some of the new policies and practices that the department has put into place are really not even designed to be fully operational until we get to FY26, which will kick off in the coming calendar year because of the department's sort of 2-year fiscal approach. The other reason is that there are some growing pains going on within the department. Officials are still new to these new requirements and practices. They're not quite sure how to implement them, how to make sure they're following the requirements accurately. And at the end of the day, we really want to make sure that the department is truly transforming its business operations in a way that is fundamental.
And this is part of the conversation that I had in the previous television show and a number of other venues as these changes happened over the last 5 to 10 years. None of them seem to be happening long enough to give anybody a chance to really see what the results are. And you allude to that in this work. Is there a way to put a timeline on, say, establishing a CMO office to say, this is going to take X amount of time to determine whether the changes that were intended really happen? Is there a way to do that even?
Well, I think time is only one component of figuring out how a CMO could be successful. What we have found is that to be successful in transforming business operations, an officer really needs to be at a very senior level, ideally reporting directly to the Secretary of Defense. The official needs to have their responsibilities and their authorities codified in guidance that is across the department and recognized across the department, and that official needs resources in order to be able to drive reform. So those are the key elements that we would need to see to ensure that there is success.
Okay, so those three key elements, do those exist in the construct that exists now, in your view?
Well, the approach that the department has taken is interesting, because what they're saying now is essentially, look, we don't need a CMO because we have the Deputy Secretary of Defense,
right,
who is fully authorized to drive reform. And these new entities that we have created, such as the Defense Business Council and the Defense Performance Improvement Council, which is a very new entity, are there to support the deputy in facilitating and managing and overseeing reforms. What we haven't yet seen is new reforms coming from the Deputy Secretary of Defense that are cross-cutting and that are truly transformational and that have gotten to the point of success. So we are optimistic that that will happen, but we just haven't seen it.
Is the operative phrase in what you just said, and that have gotten to the point of success?
Absolutely. So DoD's approach to business transformation, as you know, is one of our high-risk areas. DoD has many of them. And one of the criteria for being removed from the high-risk list is demonstrated progress. In this case, demonstrated progress means not only instituting and announcing a new business reform or transformation effort, it is seeing it through to full implementation.
Is there any way to put success markers, guideposts, or timeline on something like that, Elizabeth?
Well, one of the cross-cutting initiatives that Deputy Secretary Hicks has announced is a full modernization of talent management at DoD. I'm sure you understand why that is so important. So looking at that effort and seeing where it is 1, 2, maybe 3 years from now will be a good indicator of whether this new approach is working.
Elizabeth Field, it's great to have you back on the program. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. You
can read more about the CMO position at DoD, including Elizabeth's work, on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today continues in a moment. Here's Ravi Jagannathan of Palo Alto Networks on Innovation in Government, FedRAMP, presented by Carasoft.
So threat landscape changes because of the actors, all kinds of actors, good, bad, all kinds of actors. They also are evolving. And the technology is evolving. Like in crypto, it's from going to quantum crypto, right? So the technology is evolving, threat actors are evolving. So in accordance with FedRAMP and their controls is also changing, and it is adapting. And how the 3 PAOs are assessing FedRAMP controls are also adapting to this new phenomenon as and when it happens.
To learn more, go to fedgovtoday.com/FedRAMP. Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, ServiceNow will host Modern Logistics and Maintenance end-to-end automated asset management. I'll be your host for the event Wednesday, November 8th at ServiceNow headquarters in Vienna, Virginia. You'll learn how the federal government can manage assets more efficiently. You can find out more about the event and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30 with the Deputy Director of the FBI and the leader of FedRAMP at GSA. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks very much for watching. See you next Sunday. Have a great week.